पिछले कुछ दिनों से कश्मीर में जो परिस्थिति निर्माण हुई है उसके संदर्भ में विभिन्न स्तरों पर हमारी चर्चाएं हुई है, उसका आकलन करने का विस्तृत प्रयास हुआ। सबसे आवश्यक इनपुट्स लेने के बाद आज हमने यह निर्णय किया है कि यह गठबंधन सरकार में आगे चलना भाजपा के लिए संभव नहीं होगा।
On June 19th, the BJP ended an alliance with the PDP that had lasted a little over 3 years and 3 months. And it was an alliance that was rife with contradictions right from the outset.
I, Mufti Muhammad Sayeed, do swear in the name of God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India, of state, as by law established.
It was on March 1st, 2015 that Mufti Muhammad Sayeed took oath as the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. The BJP and the PDP had negotiated for more than a month to form this alliance after having emerged the largest parties in Jammu and Ladakh and the Valley respectively. The BJP advocates the abrogation of Article 370, which grants a special status to Jammu and Kashmir. It has for long backed a hard line against separatists and claimed that a sustained dialogue with Pakistan can only continue if Pakistan remains committed to ending its proxy war with India. The PDP would resist any rollback of Article 370 and has had a consistent policy of backing engagement with both the separatists in Kashmir as well as the Pakistani establishment. But despite the contradictions, governance in Jammu and Kashmir was the need of the hour. The BJP and the PDP drafted what was called an agenda for alliance. And as part of this, the parties pledged to engage with what they described as all stakeholders in the state and strengthen measures to normalize relations with Pakistan.
During 2014's election, Jammu region overwhelmingly voted for BJP, with Saffron Party winning 25 seats, while on the other hand PDP got 28 out of 46 seats in Kashmir Valley. Fractured mandate led two political parties with diametrically opposite stands cement alliance. Showing respect for mandate, they stitch alliance with an objective so that they can bridge divide between Jammu and Kashmir Valley and carry forward their three-dimensional agenda of dialogue, democracy and development.
Many people felt that it will not last its full term, and yet Mufti Muhammad Sayeed was quite hopeful, and his belief in the possibility of this alliance lasting hinged on Narendra Modi being another Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He would say that repeatedly at election time. I had several conversations with him. I'd gone to cover the elections, and everything would depend on that, he would say. Of course, he had started to think about the possibility of joining hands with the BJP even before the election results came out in 2015. Because he would say, you know, you can't afford to have a hostile center and run a government in Srinagar, number one. And it had become quite clear that Jammu was going the BJP way whole hog. So you couldn't leave Jammu out of, you know, the government. and the possibility of a BJP in the center constantly talking about scrapping Article 370. On the other hand, there were the militants wanting Azadi. So he felt it would become very untenable for the government, and this was an experiment. I think it was a risk that Mufti Muhammad Sayeed took by going in for a government with the BJP.
But within days of the alliance having been formally established, there was tension. On March 7th, 2015, Masarat Alam, a separatist and someone at the forefront of the stone-pelting violence in the valley in 2008 and 2010, was freed from prison by the State Home Department. There was an uproar when Alam took to the streets with Syed Ali Shah Gilani reinforcing his separatist agenda. Eventually, the state government almost a month later booked him under the Public Safety Act and shifted him out of the valley. The PDP saw the likes of Alam as stakeholders in the valley that had to be engaged. The BJP, though, disagreed.
ये आक्रोश किसी दल का नहीं है, ये आक्रोश देश का है। ये आक्रोश उस बेंच का और इस बेंच का नहीं है, ये आक्रोश पूरे सदन का है।
Barely a year later, the alliance experienced another setback. Mufti Muhammad Sayeed, the chief minister, died of multiple organ failure. He was 79.
That was a huge setback because Mufti Saab was he was very pragmatic. He was hugely experienced. He was also a man of great reason and understanding, moderation, also with a great sense of history and appeal amongst the local masses, which Mehbooba also has. But Mufti transcended just the PDP tag. So with his experience, with his background, I think this alliance always had a better chance. Having said that, perhaps the differences in approach was just so huge, the divide so yawning and big, that even if Mufti Saab was around, it had to fold up and collapse at some stage.
A couple of weeks before Mufti Muhammad Sayeed's passing, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had paid a surprise visit to the then Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in Lahore. It was a gesture that was widely welcomed and represented an overture by India to mend fences with Pakistan. But when India was betrayed through the Pathankot attacks, there was no choice but to suspend bilateral dialogue. The suspension of what was strongly advocated by the PDP would remain a source of friction between the two parties. In 2016, this divide would further widen, triggered by a chain of events that pushed the valley back into the goalmouth of violence that was at its worst since 2010.
The death of Burhan Wani in 2016 was a turning point when alienation in the valley grew and young people coming out to pelt stones, young people losing their, I've had many people tell me this, that young people losing their fear of death.
On July 8, 2016, Hizbul Mujahideen terror commander Burhan Wani was killed in an encounter, and the valley was once again on the boil. A recruiter for the Hizbul, widely followed on the social media, Burhan Wani's death rallied separatists and stone pelters. And the violence that paralyzed the valley in the months that followed also left an impact on the BJP-PDP relationship.
I think the signs have been building up, and the death of Burhan Wani in 2016 was a turning point when alienation in the valley grew, and young people coming out to pelt stones, young people losing their, I've had many people tell me this, that young people losing their fear of death. So in a sense, Mehbooba Mufti was aware of what was happening in terms of the alienation, and she wanted that addressed, whereas the BJP was looking at the picture of an anti-terror, anti-militant, anti-violence, that kind of an approach for which it has stood. So I think things began to be much more difficult after Burhan Wani's death. There's no doubt about that.
One has to see, when did the trouble start once again in the valley? The alliance, with all its hiccups and false starts, was actually stumbling along just fine till July 2016 when Burhan Wani was killed. And following that, all the contradictions and differences, not just within the alliance, but all the cracks within the valley, which were there always underneath, also surfaced. So a killing of Burhan Wani, whereas the BJP and the centre wanted to pursue a more aggressive policy, more attacking policy towards militants, somewhere Mehbooba and the PDP felt that the healing touch was missing, the dialogue process was missing, and one completely understands both sides. Mehbooba represents the valley. You need a healing touch. You need the carrot out. But you also realize and appreciate what the BJP line of thinking is. Whom do they talk with? And especially, what do they talk about?
Mehbooba Mufti, yes, Kanun Saz Assembly has member Muntakib Karna Ahmed.
Earlier in 2016, following Mufti Muhammad Sayeed's death, the two parties, after a brief period of governor's rule, had once again come together, and Mehbooba Mufti had taken over as Chief Minister. But as the situation on the ground in the valley deteriorated and the security forces were up against an army of separatist-backed pelters, differences once again rose over the intensity with which our forces should respond. Mehbooba Mufti's claim that she would have given Burhan Wani a second chance had she known about him did not go down well with those who advocated a no-compromise solution against terrorists in the valley. What cannot be denied is that governance in the state became an increasingly difficult exercise under the BJP-PDP government, a tenure that coincided with an upsurge in both terror activity and stone pelting violence. The points of divergence continued into 2017. In April that year, following an incident of stone pelting in Badgam, Major Litul Gogoi had an alleged pelter tied to a jeep to deter further pelting after he and his men came under attack after trying to rescue officials trapped in a polling station. The J&K police filed an FIR against the act, but the central government backed Major Gogoi's actions.
My mine-protected vehicle got stuck in a muddy area, in which, seeing us, again the stone pelting have started. And that time it was also an announcement made in the mosque, and with that announcement the civilian has started gathering, and that time they were more violent. Even they have thrown a petrol bomb on us, but somehow that petrol bomb did not burst it. And by seeing this, I instructed my boys to somehow move out the mine protected vehicle from that area, and they tried to do it, and we managed to rescue the mine protected vehicle. And in the meantime, again I announced in my megaphone that give us a safe passage so that we can move out from the area, but the crowd were not listening to us. At that moment of time, suddenly in my mind the idea of tying him up in the vehicle have came up, and as soon as I ordered my boys to tie him up in the vehicle, by seeing this, that stone pelting had stopped for a while, and that was a fraction of moment where I got a window to come out safely from that place.
Arun Jaitley at the time summed up the challenge of the alliance in his interview to Times Now.
Couldn't you impress this fact upon Mehbooba Mufti? The Chief Minister has been silent on this issue, and people question this because Your party is in government.
You see, as I put it, what is the priority that we have in J&K? It's not that the BJP and PDP agree on every issue. They were ideologically, we were two different parties and we didn't have the same vision even on J&K. The elections threw up an arithmetic in which the only government which could have been formed was a PDP BJP government, and that would have represented the two regions. Now the issue before us was, do you allow governor's rule, not tie up, which was a possibility, and then go in for a fresh election? Or do you allow a democratic process which sends the right signals globally, and you have elected legislators, you have elected governments in the way, you use also effectively state parties, state democratic parties, National Conference and PDP are mainstream parties in the valley, in order to deal with the situation there. The battle in Jammu and Kashmir is not against the National Conference or the Congress or the PDP. The battle is really against the separatists. And therefore you form a combination and provide a democratic alternative to that. That is what the Congress and the NC did. That is what the Congress and the PDP did. That's an experiment which we've been trying. Now, these are very delicate experiments in which some challenges will arise, and they are indeed arising. But that's a difficult situation which we have to deal with.
From day one, everybody knew this was shaky alliance, more of compulsions than conviction. Competitive narrative between two ideologically different political parties instead of bridging gap for the deepened fissures between two. Lodging a fire against Major Aditya and withdrawing cases against stone pelters and projecting those villains and victims, further aggravated situation between two coalition partners who were pandering to their respective constituencies than working as one unit.
This delicate experiment in governance was increasingly proving difficult to manage. But the two parties had agreed to work according to an agenda for coalition, and as a consequence, there were overtures made that showed a willingness to engage and win over those at odds with the Indian state in Jammu and Kashmir. In October last year, the centre appointed former IB officer Dineshwar Sharma as an interlocutor to engage and reach out to all sections of Kashmiri society. A month later, the J&K government announced amnesty for 4,500 first-time stone pelters, a decision that was backed by the centre, though there were rumblings within the BJP against it. In January this year, the scope of this outreach was extended to more first-time offenders. And then came the biggest gesture of them all, a unilateral suspension of operations by security forces in the state, a decision announced by the Home Minister Rajnath Singh. It was a decision welcomed by most in the political class in the valley, but something that would tilt the scale strongly against the continuance of an alliance with the PDP as a result of the outcome. The so-called Ramzan ceasefire failed. Terror attacks in the valley and targeted plots against the security personnel only grew during the period. And on June 14th, SHUJAAT Bukhari, a veteran journalist regarded as a voice of moderation in Kashmir, was murdered by terrorists.
I think there were always differences, but the final straw perhaps was this month-long ceasefire during Ramzan. When the PDP insisted for a ceasefire, they wanted actually the ceasefire to be extended beyond Eid, is what we are given to understand. Whereas the ceasefire did not yield the kind of results which the BJP wanted, the kind of messaging they wanted to send out on nationalism and the issue of terrorism. So somewhere the final breaking point came with the killing of SHUJAAT Bukhari, the abduction of Indian soldier Aurangzeb, and the no let up in violence basically in the valley, despite a unilateral ceasefire from Delhi.
It was over. The Ramzan ceasefire was not extended, and 2 days after it ended, the alliance was called off.
बीजेपी की तरफ से जो विड्रॉल ऑफ सपोर्ट हुआ, उसके बाद मैंने अपना रिजिग्नेशन जो है गवर्नर साहब को भेज दिया है.
It was another experiment in coalition politics involving two ideologically opposite forces that met its fate. Jammu and Kashmir would pass through another phase of governor's rule in the lead up to the 2019 elections. What will this mean for peace and stability in the state? Only time will tell.
I think, every time there's been governor's rule, and the state has had it 6 times already, most people agree that the situation deteriorates. So successive governments at the center have wanted a state government to be there, to be a buffer between Delhi and Srinagar. It's always easier to handle the situation that way. The moment you have Delhi pitted directly against the people without a elected state government in place, the situation becomes more difficult to handle, greater alienation. So I think now that the BJP or the government at the center will rule directly the state, so every mistake or every act of commission or omission is going to be put at their doorstep, and they will have to take the blame or the credit for whatever happens.
BJP was increasingly feeling that ahead of parliamentary polls, atmosphere was building against it in Jammu and across the country for yielding to PDP's soft separatism and Kashmir-centric policy. Insistence of PDP to further extend unilateral ceasefire and adopt soft approach towards Pakistan and Pakistan proxies was further hurting nationalistic sentiments in the country. Finally, BJP had to take call and divorce PDP as it was getting untenable and intolerable for them. And this way came to an end the era of what they described as meeting of North and South Pole.